or tell me who you are.
That's going to be Sergeant Duncan.
Oh, okay.
And that's probably because that was the default that was set up on his computer when it was issued to him. So.
And is Mark Clarkson also one of our presenters this evening?
He is. Tom, is Mark with you?
No, I'm at home, but thank you, Jamie. That's exactly as a default thing. So.
Okay. Do you know how to change it to your name, or do you need some help?
He would probably love it if you helped him. It's Tom Duncan.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, please.
All right. Tell me if I misspell it.
Perfect.
Great. All right. It is 5 p.m. As the lovely lady just told us, this meeting is being recorded as well as live streamed on YouTube. Throughout the meeting, the chat feature is turned off to comply with Oregon Public Meetings Law. And please raise your hand before you speak so that we can kind of limit the crosstalk across folks. With that, Jimmy, if you'd like, or not Jimmy, John, if you'd like to get started.
Sure, thank you, Kim. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Public Safety Advisory Board Committee. This is number 12 on June 14th of 2021. The time is about 5 o'clock. I forgot to mention last time as we met, there was quite a bit of material that was included within the board handouts. And I just want to just mention in terms of if anyone have any question with those material, please ask. But there was some really great information regarding myths about mental health, behavioral health, which you also include in terms of law enforcement, that kind of stuff. So I encourage everyone to look at it. I mean, I pull up some information about in terms of mental health. 1 in 5 American people adult experience mental health issue. 1 in 10 young people experience a period of major depression. And 1 in 25 Americans live with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia.
Lee Landers.
Join the meeting.
Such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or major depression. And just want to encourage everyone to really, in terms of, if you have any question around behavioral health or mental health, please reach out to me or reach out to a provider within the community. New Narrative is a provider within the Tigard community. And I look at in terms of people who are struggling with challenges with mental health, just like someone who's going through, let's say, diabetes. They just need some help either from a primary care doctor regarding some medications or regimen of exercise to help maintain that diabetes. And mental health is no different from that. Needing to work with a psychiatrist or a caseworker to go through some therapy, maybe some medication to help maintain balance that chemical imbalance. And so, if anyone have a question, free to reach out to me. The other thing I want to also mention is that if you haven't had a chance to volunteer to be at a table at the farmer market or on Sunday, sign up. It's fun. I had a chance to sit with Eduardo for a period of time about 2 weeks ago, and it was a great experience to be able to meet people within the city, experience the market itself, and it's an enjoyable event. So sign up or come and visit the farmer market when you have a chance. I think it's on Sunday from like 10 to 1:30. With that, I am going to, I want to start off with a centering exercise, if people don't mind. So I invite you to join me in the centering and conversation tonight. First, I will read a statement, and then I ask you to join me in the breathing exercise to help bring focus and thoughtfulness to the conversation of today. So for this one, you could go ahead and turn off your camera. Today, we will convene to listen and learn from each other through reflection and discussion as we reevaluate and improve the public safety practices. We elevate the voices and experiences of the communities who have been there and continue to be disproportionately impacted by inequitable systems. We thank all those who have advocated and worked on dismantling injustice in Tigard and our broader community. We build off of their efforts and create more equitable and just outcome for people of all backgrounds and abilities. The purpose of our meetings is to, one, develop our understanding of the current public safety structure, practices, and procedures, to identify and eliminate institutional racism within Tigard public institutions by centering equity racial justice, to bring forward the concern and experiences of ourselves and our community, and to bring recommendation to the city leadership to improve the lives experience of all people in Tigard. So now the breathing exercise together. Again, you may turn off your camera if you haven't done so. Close your eyes or gaze softly downward. Feel the chair underneath your legs. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out of your mouth. Feel your hand in your lap. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out of your mouth. Feel your feet on the ground. Breathe in deeply through your nose and out of your mouth. Slowly open your eyes and begin to breathe normally. Thank you all for participating and creating space with me. With that, I'm going to ask Kim to please give us a roll call.
Great, thank you, John. Jamie McDonald,
Present.
Nicholas Nunn,
Present.
Shelby Rahala,
Here.
Michael O'Brien,
Present.
Abdi Rahim Muhammad, I see you.
Here.
Thanks. Emilio Calderon,
Here.
Liz Newton,
Here.
John Trin,
Present?
Jimmy Brown,
Here.
Lee Landers,
You are unmuted.
Here.
Patty Lofgren,
Patty Lofgren.
I'm here.
Justin Lowe,
Present.
Danny Rauda,
Here.
Valerie Sasaki,
Present.
Sean Stoldryer,
Here.
Jeff Mott,
Here.
and our new alternate, Nick Jarmer.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. John, that is roll.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you everyone who, board member who are part of this board. And it's very important. And I appreciate everyone's time and effort and encouraging being part of this board and voicing your concerns and opinions and thoughts, because it's what it takes to really, in terms of when we look at what we need to do to break down the racism within our cities and our communities. Eduardo, was there any public comments or statement?
Actually, before we get to public comment, I think we should give Nick just a moment to introduce himself, maybe a little bit about his background and why he decided, or why he applied to join the advisory board.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Kim. My name is Nick Jarmer. I am a captain for Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. Born and raised in Southeast Portland. Moved out to Tigard about 27 years ago, and hopefully will live right there the rest of my life. I really like it. I've been in the criminal justice business for over 30 years in the corrections division for Multnomah County. So that means I've worked in the jails and seen a lot of things change over the years. So when this position became available, I thought that my experience and some of my background over an extended period of time might be able to help shape how I would like and other people would like the city of Tigard to move forward. And so I put my name in the hat, and here we are, June 2021, and here I am. So thank you very much. I'll try and catch up with you guys. I know you've been working really hard because I've been watching and reading a lot of stuff. So I'll try and catch up as fast as I can. So thank you again.
Thank you, Nick. It's good to have you with us. Eduardo, any public comments or testimony?
No written public comment was submitted or request to speak tonight.
Thank you. So tonight, there's no community members have joined us to speak. So public comments are vital to the board's mission, and we welcome community feedback on our work. If you have any comments for the board, written testimony must be submitted by 4:30, the day of the scheduled meeting. And if you would like to speak at our meeting, please email our staff, eduardo@tigard-or.org. That's EDUARDO@tigard-or.gov. Additional detailed instructions are available at tigard.or.gov/PSAB. So I see that the chief is back with us. Welcome back from vacation. And I'd like to ask if you could give us an update.
Well, since I literally just got back, I don't have any real in-depth updates, but I did check last week as I was preparing to come back to find out if the Attorney General had, any progress or any updates. And from our officer-involved shooting, it's still under the review process, and they had no further updates for me. So we're still all standing by to stand by, and that's the biggest update. The legislative session will come to a close June 27. House Bill 2002 is the most aggressive police reform House bill out there. If you would like an update on that, I can do it at our next meeting that talks about, because it puts a lot of stuff in one bill. And there's been 6 amendments so far, and that's probably the most robust police reform bill that's still out there. If that's a desire by anybody to have that review before it closes on June 27th, please let me know and I'll be happy to do that. And that's all I have for today. Nick, welcome. And thank you for your service and thank you for your interest here.
And Valerie, I see your hand.
Sorry, out of practice with the unmuting. Welcome back. And I just wanted to say, yes, I think it would be really helpful if you wouldn't mind telling us about that particular bill. I think we talked potentially at some point about inviting Representative Graber too, to sort of give her perspective on what the legislature's priorities were with respect to community policing. So maybe we can carve out some time for that next session, if it's not too much trouble.
Yes, I believe that we won't be able to, we do understand the desire to bring in Representative Graber, and we are working on that. I believe her schedule does not allow until after the legislative session.
Until session's over, I'm sure she's very busy.
Yeah. So we're looking
next few weeks. So
just wanted to clarify, so you're not expecting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kim. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we should see her hopefully in July.
But thank you, Chief. I just want to give an opportunity if Commander McDonald, you have any updates or anything from you, or good?
All right, trying to unmute there. Nope, I don't have anything additional, John. I think unless there were any questions from our last session that anybody wanted to clarify, I don't have anything else new.
Thank you, Commander. Mm-hmm. All right. Our next agenda is really in terms of the procedural justice presentation. And Kim, I'm not sure who's going to be presenting on that. If you could help us introduce our presenter.
Yes, I'm actually going to turn it over to the commander to do the introduction.
Okay.
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me and see me okay? My computer is freaking out right now. So We're gonna go with it. It's okay. I'm excited to introduce two of our sergeants this evening. You see Mark Clarkson there. He's one of our patrol sergeants. There he is. He's currently assigned to day shift on the front end of the week. And then we have Sergeant Tom Duncan, who is our criminal investigations unit sergeant. And so he generally works Monday through Friday, but he actually had today off and is joining us this evening. And actually today is Mark, it's your second day back after being gone on vacation. So we are very blessed to have both Mark and Tom here with us tonight. And they're going to be talking about a concept that has been around for quite some time, and we've actually taught here at the Tigard Police Department for several years now. And they'll refer to it as PLPJ, or Police Legitimacy and Procedural Justice. And it's something that has come out of some of the larger urban police agencies in the country. I actually was trained in a similar program to what Mark and Tom were by the Oakland Police Department. That was back in 2015 or 2016 is when I went to it. So we've been teaching some of these concepts since then. So Mark and Tom will take you on a short journey. It's much more in depth than we get into with our staff, but they're going to give you kind of a high overview of some of the things that we do with our members here in the police department. So Mark, Tom, it is all yours.
Kim, will you start the slideshow or share the PowerPoint or however we do that?
Yeah, I'll be sharing it for you.
Thank you.
You should be able to see my screen.
Okay.
Tammy, I can see it. Yes.
Yeah, we got it.
Great. So if you just tell me next slide, and I'll advance the slides for you.
So like Jamie said, we've been teaching this in the department for Mark and I have been teaching it for several years now, but a lot of these aren't like any kind of different really components. It's just trying to, highlight the work that we do and how this really is in all facets of life and our work too. So Mark, feel free to comment too, anything you want to do on that.
All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we went through this training a couple of years ago, and we've had the pleasure of being able to start teaching this pre-COVID, pre-George Floyd, pre-everything that's happened in the last couple of years. And it really plays into a lot of what we're doing here today. We're going to do, as the commander said, kind of a real brief overview of what the tenets are. But there's a historical part of this that we're not going into that many of you probably already know. So we do talk about in this class racism in policing, the history of policing, people's different perspectives based on their positions, whether it's class, race, etc., and how they may perceive you. And so we're taking that information first and presenting that, and then we kind of build into it. It's very difficult to do this class via Zoom. We've always done it live because it's a participatory class. It's designed to be back and forth and working with the group. So keep that in mind. We've never done anything like this via Zoom, but we're just trying to give you an idea of what it is. Fair enough? Okay. All right. Tom, anything to add?
Nope. Go ahead and next slide, please. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'll go ahead and take over if you don't mind. So objectives here today, what we're basically going to go over is understanding the concepts of legitimacy and procedural justice. And again, we're going to give you a brief overview. Gain a better understanding of the human dynamic between police and the community and each other's perceptions, and consider the concept of managing perception during every encounter. And this is really kind of what it's all about for us, is to say, hey, the way that you're perceived is not necessarily what you're trying to express. And just by putting on this uniform and entering into a situation, there are people, and many people, that have a preconceived notion of how this is going to go. And it's up to us as the professionals to try to break down that barrier and to make sure that people understand that we want to communicate, we want to hear your voice, we want to respect you. So at any rate, to practice better, safer, more effective policing and identify behaviors that reflect those concepts by using real life examples. We do a lot of videos in this presentation, not this presentation, but our actual presentation, to demonstrate good examples of policing and some really, really bad examples of policing and communication. And again, trying to bridge that gap to say, you know, what kind of police officer do you want to be? Someone that people feel comfortable approaching, or somebody that is afraid to even deal with you? Tom?
There we go. Unmute. Next slide, please.
I've seen this before. There we go.
So these are the real true big 4 components of procedural justice. And obviously all these are focusing on trying to attain legitimacy. We have voice, neutrality, respect, and trust. And we'll, Mark and I will break down the 4 different components and talk about that. So next slide. So like it says, giving the public or community a voice to be able to explain their situation, tell their side of the story, voice their point of view, make arguments, or present evidence that makes them feel like they are part of the process. It's really what this says. It's a lot of the complaints that we get are citizen complaints about the perception of how the officer treated them, or it was a verbal disrespect issue. So this is to really give community members a voice and be able to explain our processes. Like Commander McDonald says, there are very few things in this job that have any secrecy. We want to be very open and upfront. We want to be able to give people that voice so that they can tell their side of the story of an encounter with us, whether it was good or bad. Mark, do you have anything to add on that?
Right. Exactly. Point on that. You know, the thing about this class is that I found, you know, it has this big fancy title, but really is a communication class. And it's about teaching people how to open up and be able to communicate well so that you can actually do your job better. And, you know, back when we went to the academy years and years ago, what they taught us was verbal judo. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's us directing you to do essentially what we want you to do by trying to convince you of our way. And this has really changed in the last, you know, 5-10 years. We're really trying to be much more open and hear your side and actually take that in and be more approachable. So it's, you know, things have changed a lot. I think we're good for the next slide, if you are. Okay, we're covering up on mine part of this. So there we go. So into neutrality. So I have it up on another screen. People react to evidence that the authorities with whom they are dealing are neutral. This involves officers making decisions based upon consistently applied legal principles and the fact of an incident, not an officer's personal opinions and biases. Transparency and openness about what the rules and procedures are and how decisions are being facilitated. The belief that decision-making procedures are neutral. This helps police to be seen as acting neutrally. And I think, I mean, this is obviously an issue for everyone. If you feel like we're not hearing you and we're not being neutral in a situation, then what fairness is there in the world? And trying to show officers examples of where we have videos, examples where we show this, of where this is happening in a wrong way, and try to internalize that and slow yourself down and realize that, you know, we need to, I know we are neutral, but we need to appear neutral and show that we're neutral and prove that we're neutral through everything we do, whether it's communication or transparency. Tom?
Sorry, Mark, I was trying to unmute. Were you done with that, or are you ready to next slide?
I'm good. Do you have anything to add?
No, go ahead.
All right. Honor, respect. Okay. And this is kind of, you know, what it's really all about. People are sensitive to whether they are treated with dignity and politeness and to whether their rights are respected. The issue of interpersonal treatment consistently emerges as a key factor in reactions to dealing with legal authorities. People believe they're entitled to treatment with respect and react very negatively, dismissive or demeaning interpersonal treatment. And this is something that if I was to say one of the biggest complaints, like we spoke about earlier, that line right there, I think sums it up. And that's dismissiveness. And, you know, that tired officer that deals with folks and has just heard it all before, and here we are again, and just tell me what happened, and being able to try to change that behavior, both through training, supervision, peer support, etc., is kind of what this class is about. So, treating others with respect, dignity, and politely shows that their rights are being respected and validates their worth as an individual. Yeah. Next one. Tom, you want to take it?
Sure. Let me. Okay, so trust. People focus on cues that communicate information about the intentions and character of legal authorities with whom they're dealing, how trustworthy we really are. People react favorably when they believe that authorities with whom they are interacting are benevolent and caring, and are sincerely trying to do what is best for the people with whom they are dealing. Authorities communicate this type of concern when they listen to people's accounts and explain or justify their actions in a way that show an awareness and sensitivity to people's needs and concerns. And so like the chief always says, do the right thing all the time for the right reasons. But that's kind of what this is about: doing what is right, gaining compliance, building a reputation. We want to build that reputation where people feel that they can trust us and trust us by our actions.
Hey, Mark and Tom, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Please do.
So for the folks on the board, one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago over a couple of sessions was hiring. And you see these different areas that we're talking about when we're talking about procedural justice and police legitimacy. These are some of the things we look for in our candidates when we're looking for people to hire. Are these types of traits, these values, so that they can espouse these when they come to work for us and they go out into the community. These are some of the types of people that we're looking for, so that when they're out working in Tigard, in your community, they are reflective of this type of work. This is what we're expecting of our people to go and do. So not only do we train this in our current staff, we're looking for it in our prospective officers that are coming to work here. So sorry, guys, I didn't mean to derail you.
No, thank you. And next slide. I love this little sign there. You're never too important to be nice to people. I mean, that's just.
Tom, before you go on, Valerie has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So I just wanted to clarify, because something Commander McDonald made me think about this. So this training is something that everybody goes through, right? It's not just something that newer recruits go through.
Correct. Everybody gets this class taught by Mark and I, and it's like Mark initiated, or like Mark said in the beginning, it's, what is it, Mark, about a 4-hour long class, and we do it, at least once a year to all staff. And okay. It's a very hands-on training. We do a lot of group exercises. Like Mark said, it's very interactive. It's definitely hard to convey some of the in-depth on how we get through Zoom or Microsoft Teams type of thing.
The state of Oregon teaches the class, and they actually put it on at the academy in a much more lengthy fashion for the recruits. So every recruit that goes through now gets what is described to me as much days and days of this. Okay. Our class is designed to bring up the veteran officers that have not gone through it, and to refresh the recruits and the younger officers that have gone through it. So everybody gets a chance, not to reiterate, but especially now when you're a new hire, you're going to get an extended version of this training at the academy as well.
Which is great. Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And then, well, I have other questions, but I'm sure you may cover them, so I don't want to interrupt any further.
Right on.
Oh, go ahead and please ask questions as they come up. So we're getting close to the end of the PowerPoints. Like I said, I love that little sandwich board sign there.
Tom, we still have a few more hands. Jeff?
Okay, sorry.
Hey, thanks for showing us this presentation. Really appreciate it. You brought up the verbal disrespect and dismissiveness of how we in quotes get those complaints often. Is that like a police departments in general, or Tigard police get this complaint? Just be a clarification on that.
I would be, yeah, I would say that police in general get this, and we get our share as well. And I've worked in a number of different departments over the years, but I've been here for 13 years. And we certainly don't get as many as some other departments do, but we have our fair share. And so I think it's important to teach people how to communicate, how to slow down, and how to actually hear what people are trying to tell you. So yeah, we in both senses, really.
Okay, cool. And then if an officer gets a complaint like this, what steps are taken to address it, just kind of in general?
We have, depending on the nature of the complaint, whether it's essentially it'll come into a supervisor will take in the complaint, and then we will either open a literal IA if it's a policy violation. If it's not a policy violation, if it's more of just courteousness or something more along those lines, that might be a counseling situation where we'd actually sit down with the officer and counsel them one-on-one about the scenario. I will tell you, I am so happy that we have the body-worn cameras, and there it is. And it is going to be so useful for us to be able to mentor officers and to be able to actually work with them on their own styles. If there is a problem, which I'm expecting that it actually will be the exception. That's my expectation. But if there is a problem, we will know about it.
Thank you, Mark. And just so everyone knows, we do have a unit coming up on specifically performance review as well as discipline. So we will be covering that in a later session as well. And John, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I'm curious in terms of, because when the commander was talking about in terms, and then you're presenting the 4 component of the PLPJ of neutrality, voice, respect, and trust. I guess my question, or maybe my comment would be in terms of how do we tie that into other areas that I believe when we talk about respect is cultural sensitivity or trauma sensitivity. How does that get folded into this type of training? Because when we talk about in terms of respect and trust, there are those aspects that should be considered.
You're absolutely correct. So the first quarter, I would say 20% of our training is specifically on individual cultural groups, racial groups, socioeconomic groups, etc., and their perspectives of police, really their historical relationship with the police, right? And how it has not been positive forever. It's not necessarily been positive as of lately, and how that can be viewed as a barrier that we have to overcome, right? So the historical part is brought in early in the training. We did not do that here. We were just giving you the tenets of what we're trying to get to the meat of it, if you will.
Thank you, Mark. And Justin, I see your hand.
Hi there, Mark. Thank you very much for this presentation. One of the things that I was thinking about and that I've learned about in my classes in criminal justice is an emphasis on trust in procedural justice. And you were talking with Jeff about how an individual can file a complaint if they feel like there has been something wrong in terms of procedural justice that they would like to report. And my question is, outside of there being a process to file a complaint or a report for a citizen, I know that this is resource intensive, but is there any efforts or ability to loop back to that individual to maybe rectify or apologize or to provide some sort of closure to any individual that might feel like there was not procedural justice in their interaction?
Sure. I've seen experiences where we've had communication failures, where we've done mediation, both between the officer and the individual who felt disrespected. That was one approach. There's many ways to go with it. Typically, in my role, we're on the street right now, right? And my role in supervising the folks out there is if I get a complaint that is something that I can fix immediately, I'd much prefer to do that right now and actually let you know I'm hearing you, and let's come to a conclusion that we're both satisfied with. And sometimes that's all it takes. It's just a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of how the process works, if you will. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of extra time to do that. You know, Commander McDonald could probably speak better to the end of the road things that we do, because in my role, it's very much the direct in the moment things.
Got it. That makes sense. And a follow-up, if I may, is then, is that on an individual basis between officers, or is that standard operating procedure for the entire department?
Yeah, Mark, I can hit that.
Thank you.
Justin, we circle back with anyone that makes a complaint at very least at the final resolution. There may well be other contacts throughout the process, but at very least they get a final disposition as to what we came up with. And that's true for everyone that files a complaint with the police department. They will get some sort of a final resolution, whether it's from the direct supervisor like Mark's talking about at that specific time, or whether it actually comes from the chief at the resolution. So yes, everyone who makes a complaint to the department will get a final resolution when we're all completed. And there's generally points of communication throughout the process as well.
Got it. That answered my follow-up. Thank you very much, Commander McDonald.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commander. And Chief, did you have something to add?
Yes, taking it a little bit further, when we talk about other ways to resolve, conflict or a set of opinions, we do have mediation. And in my 4 years, we've had one individual take on that mediation, ask for it, and the officers also agreed to it. And it really was, she self-proclaimed had some mental health issues and also cultural religious beliefs, and felt that the officers didn't, take that into consideration or value that. And from that, we had a dialogue, and she really appreciated that one-on-one interaction with the officer, and for her to explain how she felt, for the officer to explain his actions or why he did the things that he did. And I think it created a better understanding from both sides. And to this day, she's reached out and communicated on other concerns where she trusts us and will reach out to us. So again, we have different ways of trying to resolve conflict or disappointment.
Thank you, Chief. And Sean, I see your hand.
Thank you. I shouldn't share this story, but gosh, it's been 25 years and I'm a different person. I remember I was in college at Oregon State University and studying for midterms and driving to get coffee and gas. And I pulled out of a gas station against the red light, against traffic. I got pulled over and I got 2 tickets. And I was really mad. There was no traffic. I was really mad that I got these 2 tickets. And I went down to the police station the next day, fully intending to file a complaint against this officer. And I got talked out of it. And as I've aged and become much more responsible, I'm not 21 anymore. Cocky young Marine, college kid. I guess I've learned some things as I've gotten older. So how do you handle when people pick a fight with the police officer because they don't like the outcome of the ticket or the penalty for a crime?
On a ticket, most of the time, obviously the best recourse for everybody is to go to court on the citation, because that way, not only do you get it to use your voice, like we just talked about, is you also have the judge, like Judge O'Brien did for numerous years, to be able to actually be there and kind of weigh both sides.
Great, thank you.
If I might, it is impossible to make everybody happy all the time with what we do in our line of work. I think the most important thing is that it is fair, and that people that they actually feel like it's fair, if that makes sense. That it is fair, and I want you to also feel like it's fair. And if you get a ticket and you're unhappy with the ticket, you're going to feel less. You're going to feel less badly about it if you see other people getting a ticket in the same place at other times, I would assume, right? It stinks it's your turn to get the ticket, but as long as I think that justice is applied fairly across our community and not targeting anybody, I think it feels better. Does that make sense? I don't know that we can ever make anybody happy with the ticket scenario, because you're mad because you got a citation for something that you did. Maybe you feel like you didn't deserve it. Look at all these other people going faster than me, et cetera. We've all heard it, right? But it's, it's about being professional, explaining the purpose of the citation. And if you want to talk to somebody about it, we're not going to deny a conversation with the supervisor to try to give you another chance to hear your side of the story. We have the time here, not a ton of time, but we have the time to do it, and it's a priority for us.
Thank you.
No, yeah, thanks for those answers. What I was really looking for is just it is really hard. It is really difficult to do your job, follow these new reform procedures, and keep everybody happy and keep the peace. Ultimately, I paid the 2 tickets and became a better and safer driver, and my life is better for the experience. So anyways, thank you very much.
And Jimmy, I see your hand.
I'm having so much technical difficulty, so I'm going to believe that it's the mice that are running around chewing up wires. But so I'm on a different machine right now. One, I appreciate the presentation that Mark and folks are putting together regarding the procedural justice piece, but it brings to me a number of questions, and so let me see if I can kind of frame those questions. The statement preconceived notions seems to relate to police looking at citizens and citizens having or community members having a preconceived notion. So my comment is, how does the training deal with the preconceived notions that come from police toward community members? We know they exist. We know they exist, in my experience and exposure in working with police departments across the country relating to young people and adults involved in gangs, that there was a preconceived notion that if you were wearing certain types of clothing, then that gave police officers a sense that that particular individual was a gang member or a gang banger, or however the terminology might be used. So that's certainly one piece of that concept of preconceived notion from police toward community members. The other is, and it relates to what we're discussing here tonight. And my sense is that this is really a focus on training that's post-contact related, as opposed to in the moment contact. As an example, if I have been pulled over, for what may be alluded to as an improper lane change, and my sense is that a particular officer that has pulled me over treats me in a manner that I do not find to be appropriate, is my recourse then focused toward my voice going toward filing a complaint or trying to talk to a supervisor post-contact, as opposed to, can I call and say, can your supervisor come to this particular place right now and let me speak to your supervisor? And the reason I say that is because if what we're really talking about is the training element for a police officer before they're out in the community and whatnot. The community perception is, how do I have my voice at the moment that I have that contact with that police officer? How do I know that that police officer is trustworthy, as procedural justice talks about, if that officer is trustworthy simply because he or she may be wearing a uniform, which, as we know, is part of the trustworthy thing. I'm in this uniform, I've passed my certification process, therefore I'm trustful and trustworthy, and you can trust me. And we know that that isn't always the case. I know that was a rather long statement, but you know,
if I may, I totally understand it. I think as police officers, it's our responsibility to make those, what we call, it's kind of like the banking system, we call it like making deposits, small deposits. We're out there literally day after day proving that we are trustworthy, that we are somebody that's going to help. And if we're not doing that, if all you're seeing from us is like, you know, the enforcement side, the hard edge side, then we're doing our job completely wrong. It's, we have to make those community investments as individuals in this uniform so that folks recognize that. And of course, if anyone ever asks for a supervisor on a traffic stop, we're coming. I mean, it's absolutely, we're here every day, every hour for exactly that type of a scenario.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands. So Tammy, if you want to pull back up the presentation.
Yeah, here's the crazy part. There's just one more slide. So we went right into questions. The next slide is kind of the takeaway. So, right. If there are more questions, we're happy to answer them.
Chief, please. Oh, Chief, you're muted.
Okay, now that'll work. You know, I want to thank Mark, you know, for the presentation. Both Tom and Mark, they're very experienced sergeants, they understand. But one of the things I want to just put this all in context. So this again comes from 21st century policing. It was so important, police legitimacy, building trust, that is one of the pillars in and of itself. And so when I came here and we assessed ourselves with the 21st century policing pillars, one of the things that we wanted to invest was to have our own train the trainers. So Mark and Tom stepped up to the plate and they went to the train the trainer, and they've owned this, because I think it's so important that we do this annually for our folks as reminders. So again, you may get a big section of it at the police academy, but you're getting inundated with everything, laws and how to do a traffic stop, that isn't really going to resonate until you're actually doing the job. So I think it's very important for us to continually, just like ethics that are annual, firearms are annual, there's certain things that we need to just remind people. And we see the negative side of society, and we have to check ourselves to make sure that we don't get jaded. And by having this training, having the dialogue, like I said, it's got to be a dialogue. It's got to be with the video showing good behavior, bad behavior. You know, we know that there are motor officers who have been motor officers for their entire career and have never gotten one single complaint. And they're making a tremendous amount of stops, but it's how they do it and the interaction and care that they give to the person that they're contacting at that time. So I just want to again iterate to the board that I definitely believe in this. I know these two sergeants and the commanders, and we think it's important. And we continue to have this annually and talk about what this looks like. And it's going to look different for a lot of different people. But if you go back to those tenets, and really is the voice, first and foremost, we have to be able to listen and have our community members be heard. We don't have to agree or disagree, but just the fact. One of the other things that often comes up when you hear across the country is, let's just say, a felony stop, right? And you've all of a sudden stopped somebody in a car, high profile, you have to get them out, walk them back, or put them prone on the pavement, only to find out that, oh, it's not the car. And we always scurry away to go find the bad guy, and nobody's left to talk to the individual who's really just been traumatized about what just happened to him. And so we really do try and take care to, at the very least, have a sergeant stay and explain our actions, what information we had at the time, why this happened, and to provide that information. And that's just been something that we continue to have to be aware of. And culturally, early on in policing, it was, hey, we're the police, we don't have to do this. And over time, you know, we've learned that that trust is built on the actions. And oftentimes people, you know, will understand if you just give them the information as to why we did what we did. Most of the time it can be resolved at that moment and not have to go to a formal complaint. So again, just want to, we thought it was very important for you guys to see a little snippet of what this training is about and why we do it every year.
Thank you, Chief. And Commander, do you have something to add? And then it'll go to you, Valerie.
Oh, I tried to lower my hand, but the chief was hitting on it. That piece of connecting with the community when we've had maybe a higher profile incident that you wouldn't normally see, right? And not only the people that are involved, but maybe bystanders, people that saw it happen. One of the things we talk about all the time with our officers is taking the time to explain to people what they may have seen, hear what their concerns may be, but then also taking the time to talk to bystanders that were completely uninvolved. Because like Mark said earlier, there are so few secrets in what we do. You know, yeah, we can't talk about the personal information of people that we're working with or dealing with out on the street, but we can talk about why we did things and how we did them with very few exceptions. So anyhow, that's all.
Thank you, Commander. And Valerie?
Okay, so I actually have two questions, unsurprisingly. My first question is, you talked about how as part of your training, and I really, really appreciate that you do this, because I think it's so important that, you know, our officers have the tools to be successful in their interactions with the community. You talked about culturally competent communication as part of the first unit, which I think is so valuable. But, you know, what John said at the beginning of our meeting really resonates with me. You know, do as part of that training, do you have help give them the tools to talk with people who may be approaching things from a different mental health perspective? And what does that look like? That's my first question.
This training is not the appropriate training for that, but there is training that is.
Okay.
And we are moving towards getting everybody in the department through advanced CIT. And many of us have already been through it years and years ago. And this is a training where you literally deal with those scenarios for 40 hours. You get to actually meet folks live and in person who have been affected by the police that were in mental health crisis and see the effects in reality right in front of you and ask questions about it. And that is where I think that is the best training for that specific issue. This is, you know, our training tends to be 3-4 hours. You're trying to hit a bunch of points.
Right.
Really, it's about communication. How are you going to communicate? How are you perceived? And if you're being perceived a certain way, you don't intend to be perceived that way, then maybe we can work on that, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, we all could benefit from that, right?
Really, I could. Yeah.
Hey, Valerie, I just want to clarify, CIT is the critical intervention training. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, it's crisis intervention.
Crisis intervention.
Crisis intervention.
That was funded by the police levy?
Correct. Yep.
That's great. No, that makes me really happy to hear. And then the other thing is, you know, when you're having a communication with someone and you're worried about how they're perceiving you, I'm wondering what touch points you as trainers have within the community to ensure that, you know, the training that you're going through is meeting the needs and expectations of the community. Are there things that you do to update, you know, the training as you go through to make sure that there's a matching there?
I think you're exactly on point. I was talking about this just about a month ago. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this training was developed before everything that's happened in the last 2 years happened. And I personally think that we could do a pretty decent rework of it. It's going to take some time because I think emotions are high on everybody's emotions are high. And I think that needs to be addressed. And actually how we're addressing each other in the street is informed by that. And to stand back, I think there's more to be done.
Okay, no, that's fair. I was just wondering. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mark. This curriculum is always developing, and we see different incidences and we learn from them, whether, you know, most of the time they're bad incidences, and we see how we, as a police department, especially here in Tigard, how we can make that better so that we don't do that, make that same mistake that maybe another agency did.
Thank you. And Michael, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up quickly on a comment that Officer Clarkson, made about courts and the role of courts in this process. And of course, we have similar problems in being perceived or wanting to be perceived as impartial and have legitimacy by people who appear in front of us. Many of those people bring grievances with them that they choose to bring to court rather than address through the internal police processes. And judges recognize generally, I'd say even the vast majority of judges recognize that a lot of people are there to air grievances related, for example, to a traffic stop. And those grievances very often have very little to do with the legal issues presented by their case, but people get a lot of leeway because there's a therapeutic function that courts fulfill. There is a point, though, in that process where the details rise to the level and the time consumption rises to the level where judges will refer defendants back to the internal processes of the police department and encourage them to bring it up with the supervisor and pursue it at that level. But I think we grapple with many of the same issues in a courtroom. Thank you.
Thank you. And Justin.
My question is kind of taking the procedural justice portion of this and going a little bit higher at a 10,000-foot level than the training that you just shared. And it would be, I'm curious if there's any training or any program that you all have that is retroactive in nature in terms of procedural justice. And what I mean by that is I understand that this training is meant to address current interactions that you have with your day-to-day incidences and engagements with citizens. But I'm thinking back to our previous points about trauma. I'm thinking also about generational trauma, and specifically for communities of colors and other frontline communities. And I'm wondering if, and this might be beyond your specific presentation here, and maybe the commander or chief could speak to this, but I'm wondering if there's something that is specifically done to address past harms and past lack of trust to bring those communities into the fold and feel like they can have those relationships repaired and built outside of present day interactions with police.
You know, Justin, that's a great question. And that has to be continually ongoing. It's not a one-time event, check the box, because throughout somebody's lifetime, it could happen at any time. When I was in Tacoma, we had Project Peace, and you would sit down and you would listen and acknowledge. When we came here, the biggest venue for that was building bridges, which was, if you're familiar with that, that has been going on for 5 years. And it is really brought on after the Ferguson and trying to build that bridge between communities of color and law enforcement. And a lot of our community members, and some are Tigard residents, that would participate in those dialogues, because Tigard in itself doesn't have real designated affinity groups, and so building bridges was a way to make the contact. But I think you have to see opportunities. I've just had them one-on-one with community members. I think when you're in, when we were in the virtual world and a chat with the chief, and just acknowledging what is happening in the world, whether it happened truly in Tigard or whether it happened, in Minneapolis. And so I think it's got to be a constant, and I think it's going to present itself in different ways. And when it does present itself, it is so important that we take a moment to hear it, to address it, to acknowledge it. And like I said, and probably Jimmy can attest to it more, is I've just had individuals come knock on the door and just tell me their experiences with law enforcement and how they were troubled and wanted to do something to make it better. And again, it wasn't necessarily their experience in Tigard, but their lived experience is their lived experience. And police are then kind of considered all equal, right? The police is police, and it didn't matter whether it was in Los Angeles, California, or in Tigard. And so I just think that those opportunities have to be embraced, however they may present themselves.
Thank you, Chief. And I appreciate that you have thought about programs like that, like building bridges. I'm just very loosely familiar with it, but I understand how that fills the gap here in this community. You did mention, however, and this is something that I'd like to hear more about, or maybe have you explain, is that your experiences have been on an opportunity basis where they have come and approached you. But I guess I'm thinking also about community members that might not either have the awareness that they could do that, or even the comfort and confidence to be able to do that based on their past experiences with law enforcement.
Absolutely. And that's where we do the outreach. And I think I not to put Danny on the spot, but you think about his role at St. Anthony's, and he reached out and said, hey, here I'm new, but I would like to host, again, it was in the virtual world, but I'd like to make connections. Our congregation is hurting. We're very diverse. And so I've never turned anybody down. And I look for kind of an opportunity, both from people who do that kind of outreach in the community. I'll try and say yes to all of them. And Danny, feel free to kind of speak to your experiences. And then we'll come from the PSAB and your connections. And so, like I said, sometimes it's going to be a one-on-one, and sometimes it might be a small group or a larger gathering. And long and short of it is, I'm going to say yes as often as I can.
Danny, did you want to add anything?
No, not really. I think just echoing what Chief said, I just really appreciated how open and willing. That was the first time I kind of reached out and said, hey, let's have some kind of dialogue, right? And it was really exciting opportunity to kind of riff off these metaphors that I've learned in the PSAB and talking with Chief about, police as guardians, and then from the spiritual perspective and the role of priests in faith communities, right? The metaphor of a shepherd, right? And so I know we continue to talk about those two metaphors internally in our community. And just recently we had this prayer vigil. So I think that's one thing that I've appreciated most about Chief and just really all of Tigard PD is how open they truly are to having that connection and building authentic relationships and connections with the community.
Thanks, Danny. And I think, Justin, to kind of end your question, is this is such a delicate time, and I would never want to presume to start the dialogue, right? Other than if we say in a virtual chat with the chief, or when I do events and let people, because some people aren't ready to have that conversation. And so to be open when it does present itself or when it's asked, I never want to shut anybody down, but trying to, again, create those opportunities and looking for our community members, our community leaders to know when somebody or a group is ready for that dialogue, then we want to jump on that chance. Some aren't not ready yet, and I understand that and respect that space too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And Commander, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back with Justin that as a part of the police legitimacy procedural justice training that we do with our team here, we talk about history of policing. And that's a critical component of it because it's important for officers to understand where policing in this country started. And it wasn't a very rosy start to policing. I mean, literally policing started as slave patrols in South Carolina, right? And it's important for police officers to know that, to recognize our history and where it came from and why certain communities are impacted in the ways that they are. So understanding that is critical, and understanding that even though that's been 400 years, that as recently as 50 years ago, there were very serious issues that were promoted by the police in this country. Not that just happened, but it was actually promoted. The government actually was having an expectation of police to do certain things that were, just horrible. So it hasn't been the greatest history. And so understanding where we came from to where we're at now and where maybe the profession needs to go is critical for everyone in this profession to know and understand. So that is a part of the instruction that we do with our people.
Thank you, Commander. That's a really good reminder of why we're all here this evening. John, I see your hand.
Thank you, Kim. I guess my question is around in terms of when we look at in terms of policy legitimacy and procedural justice. Of course, there's going to be complaints that come in and is reviewed. Some complaint will be justified, other one will be talked about in terms of, yeah, you're right. But I guess for me would be in terms of how often are we, or is the department reviewing those complaints and taking some of those complaint and modifying the training to be more inclusive so that you are updating those 4 components area?
So as part of our accreditation, first of all, I see all the complaints. They're going to come and land ultimately on my doorstep. And whatever the outcome is, whether it's exonerated, sustained, not sustained, I'm going to see them all, and I'm going to see them in the total packet. In other words, if it was a rudeness complaint, I'm going to see exactly what the scenario was. The nice thing about having the sergeants handle this is, or lead the training in procedural justice, is they also are aware of the complaints and they can see opportunities to infuse those into the training. And then we do an annual review of all complaints, and we do an analysis of those complaints. One is part of our accreditation standard that we have to meet. And so we look for common themes, we look for patterns, whether it's a particular officer or a particular squad shift. We're looking for, is it in the same district? And so we're looking for anything that might have a common pattern that we may need to address. And so there are definitely checkpoints along the way that we keep track of. So that's a great question, John.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. And Sean, I see your hand.
Just a comment, really. I think this training you're doing is great. I guess as a multi-generate. So I moved to Oregon when I was 2. My parents are from the Midwest, and my dad was in the Navy, Vietnam vet, and so I grew up in a really anti-cop family. It was police were bad. They were scary. They were to be feared. And it was in high school, seeing SRO, seeing professionalism, seeing kids go into criminal justice majors, becoming police officers, that police became not scary to me in my early 20s. So as I've gotten to know Oregon, I haven't seen Oregon police officers have the dysfunction that I've witnessed in some of the towns I've traveled to in the Midwest, where there's really a lot going on that we don't have time to even really describe here. Oregon is different than other parts of the country. I think you guys have done a great job historically. I honestly can't say how you're doing with your current training, because my only interaction with you guys is when I see you volunteering at the local schools when I'm volunteering, and we haven't done that in a year. So it sounds good, and it looks like you're going the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And Valerie, I see your hand.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that, I absolutely understand where Sean's coming from, just because I have relatives who are police officers on the East Coast, but I do think that there are issues with police officers in Oregon that have made the press, and so part of our role here is to how can we help Tigard avoid those situations, and how can we help people here have the tools, our officers have the tools that they need, so that we don't fall into those traps. So, so I hear where you're coming from, Sean, but I don't entirely agree that police officers in Oregon are without fault.
Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Valerie.
And no, Valerie, just to reiterate your point, the common theme here is we're all human beings, right? And first of all, as you know, because we've talked about it, is who you onboard in this profession. So obviously the type of people that we're trying to hire, it starts with that. And then of course the training and so forth and so on, and the culture that we create, or I create, and the community expectation. But the other thing, which was another pillar of 21st century policing that's important, is again, time. And you talk about officers' mental health and their resiliency, right? And the example that I mostly used when I was actually meeting in person is you have to have time for even the officer to wind down and de-escalate. If I just went to a SIDS death, so a sudden infant death, to me, that's one of the most tragic events, right? And because we don't have enough officers, or we got to go, now I've got to go to a theft in somebody's yard. And I always do a little facetious in saying it was a theft of a gnome. And the officer has had no time to take what they just saw, the trauma, and then they've got to come with that same type of compassion and care to a theft of property. And we oftentimes don't have that time to kind of shift gears. And then we may come across as lack of caring or desensitized, or, when in fact they could be traumatized because somebody came into their yard, violated their personal space, and took something of theirs. And that in itself can be traumatic. So I also explained that we're talking about human beings on both sides of the fence, and understanding where they may have come from. And did we, as an organization, unplug them enough when we know that they've just been exposed to a traumatic event, have the ability to decompress before we go out and ask them to take what would now be probably a routine call. And so that's all part of this as well.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, Chief, because I think it's, our common theme here is tools, right? And ensuring that we are approaching this from both sides of the fence, it's not a zero-sum game, and that we're respectful of each other. So I didn't want anybody who's going to later be viewing this to think that we were, making assumptions about, that maybe we're not making. So.
Thank you. And Sean, I see your hand.
Thanks, Valerie. I really agree with all your points. I'm glad. Feel free to share and speak freely. That's what we're here for. Yeah, I received news late last week. An architect I'm working for committed suicide. He left 2 little girls. Anyways, you know, not to get too deep, but these are really tough times, and police officers are responding to some tough situations, and it's a time. Thank you.
Sean, I'm so sorry. Liz, I see your hand.
Thank you, Kim. I've really enjoyed listening to the conversation and a couple of the things that Valerie and the chief just talked about. It's important for us as a council to be supporting both the community and our officers as we're providing the type of public safety that this community wants. And so for me, having been on staff and then being on the council as we looked at the police levy, the information that was shared for us and the realization for me that we really want this to be a service that the community embraces, and also we do want our officers to have the tools and the support that they need. And so that's one of the values I think of this Public Safety Advisory Board, is we can have these conversations, and we're learning from you about what the community wants public safety to look like. And we're also learning about our officers and the job that they want to do and the support and tools that they need. So it's important that as a council that we support everybody in this. And so I'm appreciative of anybody that will say anything about this. And so I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz. I don't see any hands, but we do have several members who haven't been able to or haven't voiced questions or comments this evening. So just want to give a moment if anyone has any last questions. Oh, okay. Well, Sergeant Clarkson and Sergeant Duncan, thank you very much for joining us this evening and for just a wonderful presentation. I think this was a really great discussion.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
All right. Again, thank you, Sergeant Carson and Duncan, for the presentation. We're a little ahead of schedule, so I want to give an opportunity to the board to discuss any current event and how they are impacting the Tigard community. So I invite you to reflect on any current events and their impact on the Tigard community. This is a space for the board to really speak about the current events. So I want to open up the floor for anyone to share any current events that are impacting our community.
And Valerie, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I do have a couple of things that we'll get to, I'll mention later, but first, I live right by the high school, and so I wanted to congratulate Abdi on graduating from high school. I believe that he was part of the class of 2021, so congratulations. And Emilio, are you also graduating this year or are you next year? Okay.
I still have 1 more year of high school.
All right. So one of the things, does anybody else want, before I leap into my other stuff? Okay. One of the things that I didn't realize was that the chairs and vice chairs of the units aren't involved in dealing with the agenda. And I would just like to put out there and ask if this is something that would be useful for the group to have a committee member, a public committee member, participate in that, because up to now, I think staff and Kim have taken the laboring oar on that. You know, but I know we've had some discussions about, you know, greater or less time for items. And so I think it might be useful for us to participate in the agenda setting process as people who are involved in, you know, heading up those units. I don't think everybody needs to participate in it, but so I just wanted to put that out there because I hadn't realized it. And, you know, so that was new to me.
No, Valerie, that's a great point. And it is in the work plan that the chair and vice chair do have an opportunity. So we will, going forward, make time for you and John both to see the topics in advance as well as the timing and have an opportunity for input.
Okay, great. And then I also wanted to thank Commander McDonald for meeting with me individually with other people individually and having a discussion about the body cam policy. And I think we're going to plan on trying to do that again next week. But, you know, we're hoping to have a discussion about that later this month and bring some thoughts back to the board. So I just wanted to thank him for that.
And so just so the entire group is aware, we asked for, or the request was made for a subcommittee and to deal with public meetings law. So individual meetings with the commander were set up, and I believe they actually all happened together, but no recommendations were formed together. And so at our next meeting, that group individually, because recommendations are presented by individuals, will each get an opportunity to share what they've learned, either in writing, spoken, or a combination, as well as any other discussion from any other members who may not have been involved in those individual conversations, but are reading the policy and have other commentary to add. We'll have that discussion and send the recommendations to the police department so that they can respond. And that will be at our next meeting.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Valerie. And Chief, I see your hand.
And shoot, I forgot to write down the date. I think it's next Wednesday, just for talking about current events. TTSD, Tigard Tualatin School District is hosting a Tigard Pride Parade. That is going to be a parade that'll be all decked out in vehicles, and they'll leave from Tualatin Middle School and go to the high school. So some city staff are going to participate, but of course the police department will as well. And so if anybody's interested or want to show support, that is next Wednesday, I think. The decorating of the vehicles in the parade starts at 4:30, and then I think the parade itself may get underway about 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Chief. And John, I see your hand.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, thank you, Judge O'Brien and Jimmy, for crafting the response to the public comment that was made on the last meeting. I'm not sure if that was shared to the board, but if not, a word would be able to send that out. So thank you for that. The other thing I just want to also mention is that the Washington County issued an RFP for future housing services services within Washington County. And really the areas where they're going to focus on is outreach and engagement, shelter and transitional housing, housing navigation, placement and eviction prevention, supportive housing and wraparound support. Again, focus on folks who are houseless, people who, folks who are at imminent of losing housing, and also really the marginalized population. So again, this is affecting all communities within Washington County, and the 3 counties, Multnomah County and Clackamas County, are also focusing on this. So if anyone has any questions, concerns, please reach out to me or else Washington County Housing Department, which is taking the lead in this. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Justin.
Thank you, Chief, for mentioning the Pride Parade that is coming up. And that is actually my comment for today, since this is the first PSAB meeting that we've had since June. And June is when we celebrate the modern Pride movement. And I just wanted to create some space to acknowledge that, especially since the Stonewall uprising was in response to police raids that happened on the Stonewall Inn back in the I believe it was 1969 in June. And so I wanted to acknowledge that for all of our Tigard community members who might identify as the LGBTQ plus community, but also just everyone in general to celebrate that, but also to acknowledge, and this ties back into my previous comment about, again, re-emphasizing generational trauma and how that carries over through multiple people's experiences based on their identity and experiences with public safety and law enforcement. And so while some folks may feel comfortable and safe with police officers and law enforcement, others may not because of histories in past, like the Stonewall uprising. So thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you for reminding us. And Michael.
Michael, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. I just want to note that Jimmy did all the work on that letter on the public comment, and I just read it and happily signed off. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And we will get that out to everybody following this meeting. And Jimmy?
Thank you. I just wanted to put a thank you out to Liz for sending us a copy of the resolution support for Tigard's Asian American Pacific Islander community. The fact that you were able to get that in front of council shortly after we had our meeting speaks volumes. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for putting that out there.
Thank you, Jimmy. Oh, Liz, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Jimmy. And the council was very appreciative that the Public Safety Advisory Board suggested it. They were honored to take that action, and it was at the same meeting that they recognized Pride Month. So some of our councilors were feeling particularly good about doing things to recognize some of our communities that don't always get the appropriate recognition and support that they deserve. So thank you.
And Jeff, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. My question is, I noticed an article in the June issue of Tigard Life around the McDuff investigation. And so I know we already went through hiring and how TPD has, background investigators. There was a paragraph in this article that talked about how Officer Maldonado, and while I know he was, originally hired 15 or so years ago, failed investigations or interviews with multiple departments across the state. So I'm just curious if there is interaction between departments or organizations when doing background investigations, or if it's usually, a start from scratch type of thing.
Yeah, in fact, there is a legislative that has been put in place to ensure that we all are communicating kind of a one-stop shop database that background investigators can go to get some information to see what's happened in other departments. So I think those concerns were addressed, and I think we're moving towards some legislative that will help us do that, because again, you go back and you can fail a background, especially if you're a young person and you don't want to discourage somebody. Maybe it's maturity, maybe it's a moment in time because they lost their job and their expenses weren't together. So depending on the circumstances, agencies could encourage somebody to continue to try if that's truly the profession they want to get into. But yes, there is movement to try and make that more available to other agencies.
Thank you, Chief. And Commander, would you like to add?
Yeah, Jeff, so I oversee our backgrounds. I think I mentioned that when we talked about hiring and background process. And so to answer your question, yes, in both areas. We do start from scratch. And if we know that they've been involved in backgrounds with other agencies, we reach out to those agencies and attempt to also review any background that they have done. Whether or not those agencies will share is a different story. And that's where the chief is commenting about that there's legislation that will now require them to share. We as an agency, as practice, have always shared with any agency that reaches out to us to ask about either current or former employees, either their background packet or any other information that would be available to them for them to be able to complete a background on, say, maybe somebody that left as an officer here. Because that's one of the things that you'll hear police officers say time and time again. The last thing they want is to be working next to a bad police officer or somebody that left under a cloud of controversy or left because they were not the right type of person for this profession. And now they're getting hired at another organization. I don't want that to be something that I am sending someone that is not appropriate to be in law enforcement to another agency. That's a problem they don't need, and that community doesn't need. So it's a multiple prong approach when we do our backgrounds. I'm pretty proud of how we do ours. because we do start from scratch. That's the expectation. We want to dig as deep as we can, but we also will reach out to other organizations that have done backgrounds and see if there's information in there that either supports or contradicts what we've found in our background, because that can be very telling. People who aren't being truthful have a hard time keeping their story straight from one background to the next. And if they didn't say something, or if they said something that wasn't truthful in another background and they're trying to also cover something up, that can be a very telling thing in a background. And we find those, unfortunately, more often than we would like to see. So that creates a truthfulness issue, and they generally are not successful in a background after that. So.
Great. Thank you for the explanation.
Great question, Jeff. And John, I see your hand.
Yes, I just want to just mention again, couple comments. Again, I'm sorry that Sean, you lost a friend. Again, this is area where many people do struggle with, but there are help. I just want to also mention in terms of Line for Life has an 800 number for anyone who are contemplating or thinking about suicide. And the number is 1-800-273-8255. And if you know somebody, you can also call that line to help get some resources out to that person. So just want to mention that. The second thing I also want to mention, just again, at the beginning of the meeting, I also encourage in terms of the board member to think about in terms of participating in the farmer market. You can reach out to Eduardo to schedule that, and there's many openings, and I think the summertime is going to be a great opportunity to really spend time out at the farmer market, understanding, get our word out in terms of what we're doing as the Public Safety Advisory Board, and meet wonderful people. And I see in terms of Council, Council Goodhouse out there last time, and also I forgot Heidi out there last time. So it's great to meet people out there and also really spend time with the community. So I encourage everyone to sign up, and again, reach out to Eduardo to get the link to sign up.
Yeah, Eduardo can send out that link following this meeting as well. I got to go and actually see John and Eduardo in person when I went to the farmers market weekend before last. It was great.
Yes, please sign up. It was a pleasure to work with John, and I look forward to meeting more of you in person.
And Liz.
Yeah, I was out there yesterday. It was pouring down rain, but it was fun. It's great to talk to people. Most rain we've had in a day since February, but I love being out there talking to people, so I didn't care. And I saw Patty there, so she was out there. The thing that I just wanted to ask the group about is, you know, Washington County's doing really good on vaccines. We're over 70% now, highest in the state. But Councilor Shaw, City Councilor Shaw, asked me if I would bring up to the group. She's continues to be concerned about reaching our communities of color. And she asked that I ask the members of this group if you had thoughts or ideas. Hate to put Eduardo on the spot, but could you maybe contact Eduardo and let him know of any thoughts or ideas you have for in the Tigard area, or just in general, suggestions or ideas you have for reaching those folks in particular. She asked me if I'd bring that up, so I'm doing that for her. So would appreciate it, because we want everybody that wants to get vaccinated to have an opportunity to do that conveniently for them. So thanks.
Thank you, Liz. Let's see, and John, I don't see any other hands.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone's dedication and time that you are offering to this board and the community, because it's important to hear your voices. The chief mentioned earlier in terms of we all are human, and being human, we'll make mistakes. And I think it's important for us to understand is that with mistake, we recognize it, we listen, we learn from it, correcting and apologizing for the harm that we made. And then we move forward and making sure that we create a system that's going to be more equitable and inclusive. And so it's great to be able to be part of this board. And I want to thank you, the board and every member of this board and the staff and the community for your input, because it's important to be able to develop a community that is very inclusive and diverse, and and equitable. So thank you for tonight. I want to pass it back to Kim to talk about in terms of the next step.
Thank you. So as we discussed, Eduardo will send after this meeting the response to Mr. Antonelli's public comment, as well as the link to sign up for the farmers market. Next meeting, we'll be discussing body-worn camera policy. We'll be hearing presentations from the 4 not subcommittee, but almost subcommittee members, as well as anyone else who would like to share some thoughts that they have on the policy as well. We have on the docket a request for the chief to describe the current police-related legislation. So that will also be during the chief's update at the next meeting. And then we will continue to work with actually Justin to bring Representative Graber hopefully to a meeting in July. And then also in July, lots of updates today, but also in July, it'll be time for another update to City Council on the work of the PSAB. As you all remember, we are obligated to do that every quarter. And so Valerie and John will be representing the group in July. And that date has not yet been set. And Valerie, I see your hand.
Yeah. Oh shoot, my mind just went completely blank. Okay, I'll email you by the person.
Okay, while Valerie is buffering, I'll just give a quick date. We do have a date. July 13th is when we are presenting to City Council. We'll have 30 minutes. John and Valerie, I'll reach out to both of you so we can get started on that presentation.
Awesome. Things move fast in Tigard. Earlier today, we did not have a date. Great. John, that is everything.
Okay. Again, I want to thank you, everybody. And also, I want to also call out in terms of June 19th, Juneteenth. Just really in terms of being able to have that day to really think about in terms of all the stuff, all Black people who are affected our society and our community, and really just to celebrate. And so I wanted to also call that out. And also the final thing is really in terms of, excuse me a second, sorry. Nope, I think that's it. I lost my main track of thinking, but I asked for the board to call for a motion to adjourn, I guess. If there's nothing else.
So moved.
Thank you. Anyone want a second?
Seconded.
All right. Or in agreement, say aye.
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 Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next month.
No, the 28th.
Not next month.
Oh, no, sorry, the 28th.
Almost next month, but not quite.
Sorry, 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.